Whether you're a newcomer or a longtime resident that needs a reminder of what a diverse state this is, coming up we'll share a sampling of the natural splendor Georgia has to offer. A beginner's guide to Georgia, next on Georgia Outdoors.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by a grant from Mary Hall Singleton and by the Imlay Foundation.
Covering a land area of nearly 60,000 square miles, Georgia is the largest state east of the Mississippi. And with one of the fastest growing populations in the country, more and more people are out exploring the state. Georgia's diverse landscape stretches from the Appalachian Mountains across rivers, lakes, canyons, and great swamps, all the way to the barrier islands of our coastline. On this episode, we'll take a step back and look at Georgia from a beginner's perspective. A good place to begin exploring the state is any of our public lands.
About 8% of Georgia is actually publicly owned. Most state lands in Georgia are either wildlife management areas, state parks and historic sites, state forests, or state natural areas. The majority of federal lands in Georgia are owned either by the U.S. Forest Service, the National Park Service, the Department of Defense, or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
We'll start our beginner's tour in North Georgia, the southernmost end of the Appalachian Mountains and home to Georgia's largest area of public land, the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest. North Georgia is divided into 3 geographic regions. In the northeast, the Blue Ridge region is one of high altitudes, cooler temperatures, and wetter weather. In the northwest, you'll find the Ridge and Valley region. And the upper western corner of the state is called the Appalachian Plateau. All of these regions are considered a part of the Southern Appalachian Mountain Range, a vast complex of mountains that stretches all the way to New England.
Geologists like to compare the Appalachians to the Himalayas. The Himalayas today are the result of India having moved forward and run into Asia. And the Appalachians were similarly, there were 2 different land masses that came together to make a one big landmass called Pangaea. That was 300 million years ago. So over time, since that activity ceased, the area has just eroded away. And what was very high mountains is worn down to almost nothing.
The Blue Ridge is where you'll find some of Georgia's highest peaks, from 2,000 feet to nearly 5,000 feet above sea level. A good place to start exploring the mountains of North Georgia is at the top. At 4,786 feet, Brasstown Bald is Georgia's highest peak.
Brasstown Bald is probably the most accessible of our mountaintops in Georgia. You can drive right to the top of it. There's a big parking lot. The Forest Service has a wonderful visitor center with a lot of interpretation to it. They have a paved hiking trail that goes about a quarter mile to the very top of Brasstown Bald with a visitor center, and that affords some really wonderful views.
Brasstown attracts visitors for photography, stargazing, and of course the #1 activity in the North Georgia mountains, hiking. Within the Chattahoochee National Forest alone, there are over 450 miles of hiking trails.
Georgia is one of those states that has year-round hiking. The weather is such that there's plenty of good hiking weather all through the winter months. We have some snow, but hiking in the snow is fun. I mean, it adds a whole new dimension to hiking.
Georgia is also home to the southern terminus of the nation's longest marked footpath, the Appalachian Trail. At approximately 2,175 miles, this trail stretches from Georgia to Maine, crossing 14 states. In Georgia, there are 76.5 miles of trail along the AT. Even if you don't hike the entire trail, there are many accesses by road, called gaps. For a Georgia newcomer, hiking a section of the AT is a good way to experience the diversity of plant and animal life found within the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest.
The Appalachian Trail is a very special resource because it's really limited to hikers. It's easy to assume that you're in the middle of nowhere because you can go for miles and not hear roads or traffic. Depending on the time of the year, you might see a bank full of spring wildflowers, or in the fall you might be interested in the different kinds of leaves that are starting to fall on the ground, because every tree has a different color and shape.
Indeed, fall comes first and most vibrantly to the North Georgia mountains. Across the rolling landscape of North Georgia, you'll find a variety of hardwood trees. From late October to mid-November, the southern Appalachians come alive with color. North Georgia is also a great place to see waterfalls. At Amicalola Falls State Park, you'll find the tallest cascading waterfall east of the Mississippi.
Amicalola Falls State Park was established in 1940, and it's Georgia's 12th state park. The name of the falls, Amicalola, comes from a Cherokee Indian word, Umacalola, and it means tumbling waters.
If you like waterfalls, you'll also want to visit Tallulah Gorge. At over 2 miles long and 1,000 feet deep, it's one of the most spectacular canyons in the eastern United States.
We have 5 waterfalls, range from 16 feet all the way up to 96 feet. Back when the Victorian era was in Tallulah Falls, it was considered a prime destination. That's what was called a Niagara of the South.
Both Tallulah Gorge and Amicalola Falls are state parks. Many of our state's most notable landmarks can be found within the state park system. You can find a state park within an hour's drive no matter where you are in Georgia.
Georgia state parks are great for newcomers because we have fantastic staff that will tell you where to go, some of the must-see places, and make sure that you have a really good introduction to the state.
If you're looking for an easy first-time getaway to the mountains, you might want to try Unicoi State Park near Helen. This popular destination features miles of hiking trails, mountain biking, and access to major attractions. Unicoi also features a variety of different ways to stay, from the comfort of the lodge to cabins and more rugged camping areas.
Unicoi is located about 2 miles north of Helen, Georgia, and we encompass about 1,000 acres, a little over 1,000 acres. We have a 53-acre lake with canoes and paddle boats. We have about 7 miles of trails.
Unicoi is also convenient to one of Georgia's most popular tourist destinations, the Alpine village of Helen. In fact, during the summer, Unicoi offers guided hikes along the 3-mile trail which runs between the park and the city.
We have a guided hike on the Helen Unicoi Trail and interpret the trail as we go.
I always tell people this is another one of those plants you should stay away from.
So it's a way to get folks out, get them active, and enjoy the outdoors.
West of the Blue Ridge, the landscape changes a bit. Gone are the high peaks and dense mountain ranges. This is the Valley and Ridge region, a landscape of fertile valleys and gently rolling hills. The western edge of the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest lies here. The upper western corner of the state is known as the Appalachian Plateau. The most prominent feature here is Lookout Mountain, a 2,000-foot flat-top mountain which stretches across Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee.
Lookout Mountain is more than 100 miles long. It's fairly unusual because it's a flat-top mountain. Folks have lived here for basically forever. Prehistoric civilizations have lived on top of Lookout Mountain for as long as time has been able to be recorded, archaeologically speaking, for human habitation.
Lookout Mountain is a wonderful place to go, both for geological reasons and for recreational reasons. And a lot of the recreation is really based on the geology.
There are lots of activities to enjoy atop Lookout Mountain, from hang gliding and rock climbing to visiting some of the tourist attractions, such as Rock City, a must-see for any newcomer to Georgia.
Whether it's caving or hiking or going to Rock City, it is a perfect place to go. A lot of the natural environment has been preserved through a series of state parks and national parks and wildlife areas. The flora and fauna represents the Valley and Ridge and the Cumberland Plateau, the kinds of plants and animals that would occur farther to the north.
One of the most popular destinations along Lookout Mountain is Cloudland Canyon State Park.
Cloudland Canyon State Park was established in 1938. Currently, the park encompasses around 2,500 acres. We have camping facilities, cottage facilities, and a lot of day use facilities here. One of the main reasons people come to Cloudland Canyon State Park is to hike and enjoy the beauty of the canyon and the waterfalls here.
Just south of the mountains, ridges, and valleys of North Georgia lies the Piedmont region, an area of relatively flat land, gently rolling hills, and exposed rock. This region is actually considered a part of the Appalachian Mountain Range, though the mountains have largely eroded away.
The entire Piedmont area is all the product of massive erosion over a very long period of time. Most of the Piedmont of Georgia hasn't seen any tectonic movement, that is, earth movements, earthquakes of any reasonable nature like that would move things, in well over 100 million years. That's a long time for erosion to move things away.
There are, however, a few mountains in the Piedmont. Georgia is home to more than 90% of 12,000 acres of exposed granite in the southeast. The largest, most visited, and most well-known granite outcrop is Stone Mountain, the largest area of exposed granite in the world. But it's not the only granite mountain in the Piedmont. Not far from Stone Mountain, Arabia Mountain and Panola Mountain were formed by similar geologic forces.
Stone Mountain, Panola Mountain, and Arabia Mountain are similar in that they are large expanses of crystalline rock. They are domed mountains that we call monadnocks.
Granite outcrops host a unique ecosystem, home to a startling array of plants and animals adapted to live on the harsh surface of the rock. The best time to visit any of these mountains is the spring or fall. The Piedmont, like other regions of Georgia, is crisscrossed by rivers. Georgia is a state of great rivers, from the whitewater mountain rivers like the Chattooga and Ocoee to wide flat rivers like the Savannah and Altamaha. Georgia's varied landscape makes for some diverse river systems. Perhaps the most well-known river in Georgia is the Chattahoochee, which begins in the Georgia mountains and ends in the Gulf of Mexico. If you want to check out all the recreational opportunities on the river, you may want to start with the Chattahoochee National Recreation Area.
This is the Chattahoochee River National Recreation Area. It runs through the northern counties of metro Atlanta, starting at the bottom of Buford Dam, ending up at Peachtree Creek in the center of Atlanta. We have hiking, we have biking, we have river access for canoeing and kayaking. It's a beautiful place to come walk and enjoy nature.
Along the Chattahoochee, you'll also find several major reservoirs, including Lake Sidney Lanier, the largest and most visited reservoir in Georgia. Georgia has no large natural lakes, but reservoirs like Lanier are found throughout the state.
Lake Lanier is in North Georgia. It's a 39,000 acre lake. In the two main tributaries that come into it are the Chattahoochee River and the Chestatee River. Some of the most popular ways people enjoy Lake Lanier is boating, for one. Aside from that, there's picnicking, camping, fishing, hiking. So there's all different opportunities here at Lake Lanier.
South of Buford Dam, the Chattahoochee flows across the Piedmont to Middle Georgia, an area any newcomer to the state will want to visit.
A good place to visit in Middle Georgia is the Pine Mountain Warm Springs area because we have two great historic resources there. President Franklin D. Roosevelt lived in Georgia. He had a vacation home here, and so the Little White House is preserved, and you can go visit and you can tour a really great museum. And then, for a little bit of exercise, you can go over to F.D. Roosevelt State Park, which has a fantastic hiking trail. It's about 23 miles long, but you can pick and choose different segments to do.
Not far from FDR State Park, you'll find Callaway Gardens, a popular destination known for its fantastic display of azaleas in the springtime.
Callaway Gardens is 14,000 acres, but 2,500 of that is what people know as open to the public. And in there we have 5 walking trails, a 10-mile bicycle trail. We have the 5-mile drive, which connects all the attractions. We're a native woodland garden, but beyond that we also have the Butterfly Center, we have the Birds of Prey show, but we're open 365 days a year, so there's there's always an opportunity.
South of Callaway Gardens, the fall line marks the southern border of the Piedmont region.
The fall line is the boundary between the Piedmont province and the coastal plain. And it's a change in topography, and it is where the rivers would have falls.
Just below the fall line, in southwest Georgia, you'll find one of the most striking and unusual locations in the state, Providence Canyon State Park.
Providence Canyon State Park is an awesome place. We have 16 canyons in all. There are 43 different colors of sands on the canyon walls. There's a 3-mile trail that circles 9 of the canyons. You can actually go off the trail and into the canyons themselves. We have a 7-mile trail that takes you more into the backcountry area.
Known to many as the Little Grand Canyon, Providence Canyon wasn't formed by natural erosion like Tallulah Gorge or Cloudland Canyon, but by poor farming practices.
The pioneers moved to this area in the 1820s, and the topography at that time was rolling hills, where they stripped all the natural vegetation and farmed cotton here. Thing is, they plowed downhill, and the soil here is very sandy. The canyon started forming in like 20 or 30 years. The reason it's so sandy here is that this area was covered underneath the ocean 80 million years ago. Each time the ocean waters rose, it deposited the soil that was in the water at that time. So when you're looking out across the canyon walls, you see the different geological periods.
The coastal plain is made up of sedimentary soils like sand and clay. Pine trees thrive in this type of soil, and pine forests are found throughout the region. This region was once dominated by one tree, the longleaf pine.
Longleaf pine forests are actually one of the most diverse forests in the world. You can find hundreds of plant species in the longleaf pine forest. You can find up to 50 plant species in a single square meter plot in some longleaf pine savannas, and that's incredibly diverse and even rivals the diversity in some of the tropical rainforests.
Once covering 60% of the southeastern landscape, these tall, long-lived trees now occupy only 2% of their historic range. South Georgia is dotted with some of the last vestiges of this mighty forest system. Much of this land is privately owned or closed to the public, but there are a few places to visit and experience this unique ecosystem. One such spot is the River Creek Wildlife Management Area near Thomasville.
River Creek, the Rolfe and Alexandra Calca Wildlife Management Area, is located in western Thomas County. One of the main reasons that we wanted to purchase River Creek was the fact that it has about 450 to 500 acres of very mature longleaf pine habitat with the associated native ground cover. It's going to provide some very important opportunities for outdoor recreation, all kinds of hunting and fishing and other outdoor activities.
A wildlife management area is a state-owned property that's specifically managed for wildlife populations. In Georgia, there are more than 90 such properties. Wildlife management areas offer hunting, fishing, and wildlife viewing across the state. Other areas managed for wildlife are owned by the federal government.
Most of the Fish and Wildlife Service lands in Georgia are known as National Wildlife Refuges, and we have a great system of National Wildlife Refuges here in our state. Best known one of those, of course, would be Okefenokee Swamp.
The Okefenokee Swamp is indeed one of Georgia's most valuable ecological treasures. Located in southeast Georgia, this amazing blackwater swamp, the largest swamp in North America, covers 600 square miles. It's a must-see for new visitors to the state, as well as folks who've lived here all their lives.
There's a quality to Okefenokee that is just especially evocative. Some of it's the size of the place. Some of it is the ecological integrity. There's just a sense of wildness, and when you get into the backcountry of it, real remoteness. It's a remarkably pretty place. That's something that surprises people a lot. They're expecting a gloomy, overhung, dank kind of place, and it's sunnier than they expected it to be. The water is fresh. The water's got this mirror-like reflective quality to it. It's beautiful.
The Okefenokee Swamp contains more than 400 species of vertebrates, including black bear, deer, birds of all shapes and sizes, snakes, and of course, alligators. Though the Okefenokee is vast and access is limited, there are 3 easy entry points to the refuge. Okefenokee Swamp Park on the north end, the National Wildlife Refuge in the east, and Stephen C. Foster State Park on the west side. These locations offer motorized boat tours, rentals, and a variety of opportunities to get a taste of this important natural resource.
I'd say probably the most frequent comments that I get would just be the silence, the opportunity to get away, the seeing the wildlife, the opportunity to get out in a boat and get back in some areas and almost feel like they're the first person there when they know they're not, but that feeling that they're that far out.
The Okefenokee is just a few miles west of our last stop on this beginner's tour of Georgia. Besides the mountains, the most visited region in Georgia is the coast. Made up of a series of barrier islands, Georgia's coast contains a variety of habitats, from the rolling dunes of the beach to the muddy grassland of the salt marsh to the majestic live oak-dominated maritime forests. Georgia's coast is an ecological treasure not to be missed.
Georgia is so fortunate because it has the most protected coast of any state on the eastern seaboard. You have Georgia with this string of pearls of these barrier islands that are under land conservation protection by many different agencies and families. And we only have development on really 3 islands out of 11 large barrier islands on the Georgia coast. The developed islands are Tybee Island from Savannah, St. Simons and Jekyll Island and Sea Island out of the Brunswick area. So you've got a wonderful beach area for the citizens in Savannah to be able to go and enjoy and recreate on. And then you've got 3 fabulous barrier islands, 2 in the Brunswick area and the Glenn County area, that again, all of us in Georgia can go and enjoy.
Of the 3 developed islands, Tybee Island, just 17 miles from Savannah, is the most visited. Most people's first experience on a Georgia beach is a trip to Tybee.
What makes Tybee so important for tourists is it represents something that really doesn't exist much anywhere else along any coastal area. It's kind of caught in time in a way. It still has a low-key, low-profile, very intimate, personal character that people really are seeking out now to get away from the very commercialized areas that you typically find along the coast.
Undoubtedly, most visitors flock to the coast for the beaches. A first-time visitor who's accustomed to the white sand and large crashing waves found on other beaches may be surprised to find the relatively calm surf, turbid waters, and large expanses of fine, dark sand that typify our coastline. Much of this is due to Georgia's unique geography.
Well, because Georgia is located in the central portion of the South Atlantic Bight, we have the highest tidal amplitudes of anywhere along the East Coast until you get up to Maine and the Maritimes of Canada. On any given day, the water goes up and down twice daily, 6 to 9 feet.
This tremendous tidal amplitude helps to sustain the magnificent marshlands of our coast. Though our coastline is relatively small, Georgia is home to 1/3 of all the salt marshes of the East Coast, over 370,000 acres.
Salt marsh is a unique biological system that is flooded twice daily, a mix of salt and fresh waters to form an estuarine environment where a wide diversity of wildlife live throughout the year. It's the true nursery of the Georgia coast.
Because the waters here are so rich with marine life, it's a great place for fishing.
The marshes are tremendously valuable to us, not only producing the seafood that we eat, but also supporting a tremendous sport fishery. And it's a growing sport, certainly in Georgia. Many of our main fish that we fish for are associated with marshes at some point during their lives. Red drum, for instance, are a big player out here in the salt marsh throughout their life cycle.
Oh, how about that?
As a newcomer to the state, you might also want to get acquainted with Georgia history, and the coast is a great place to do that. Within the state park system, there are 18 designated historic sites. On the coast, from forts to plantations, there are many historic sites which tell the rich story of Georgia's journey into statehood.
Georgia's colonial coast is very rich in history, and luckily we have several historic sites that protect all the way from before it was Georgia, the British outpost, all the way to the Revolutionary War, and then to the Civil War, which culminated in Georgia down at Fort McAllister historic site. One of the neatest places to visit is Fort King George. That was the British outpost, and we have built reconstructed buildings that show what it was really like when the soldiers lived there. You know, we've got the barracks, all the different buildings that supported them because they had this big settlement in what was to become Georgia.
Though this is only a sampling of all the natural wonder the state has to offer, Georgia's 60,000 square miles contains a vast and diverse landscape waiting to be explored. We hope that our beginner's guide has inspired you to get out and enjoy everything the state has to offer. Remember, there's always more to discover in Georgia.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by a grant from Mary Hall Singleton and by the Imlay Foundation.